Well, good morning. I'm doing the devotional again today. And today we return to Devotional Classics, a great collection of 52 Christian writers from across the centuries. And this is actually from the very first one in the book. It's not in chronological order. And the very first one is from C.S. Lewis, which I think is appropriate because he's one of my favorites. And today's reading comes from Mere Christianity. Originally, this book was created from a series of lectures that C.S. Lewis gave on the radio in the 1940s, specifically designed for soldiers. And the idea was to think about the Christian faith in the most basic way possible and to try to explain, even before getting to scriptural references, how it just makes sense to give our lives to Christ and what that really means. Arguing and talking about the nature of morality itself and how that shows us that God really exists and all that stuff. So it's really lofty ideas in very plain, understandable language. So this is from Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. The ordinary idea which we all have before we become Christians is this. We take as the starting point our ordinary self with its various desires and interests. We then admit that something else, call it morality or decent behavior or the good of society, has claims on this self, claims which interfere with its own desires. What we mean by being good is giving in to those claims. Some of the things the ordinary self wanted to do turn out to be what we call wrong. Well, we must give them up. Other things turn out to be what we call right. Well, we shall have to do them. But we're hoping all the time that when all the demands have been met, the poor natural self will still have some chance and some time to get on with its own life and do what it likes. In fact, we're very like an honest man paying his taxes. He pays them all right, but he does hope that there will be enough left over for him to live on, because we're still taking our natural self as the starting point. As long as we are thinking that way, one of two results is likely to follow. Either we give up trying to be good, or else we become very unhappy indeed. For make no mistake, if you're really going to try to meet all the demands made on the natural self, it will not have enough left over to live on. The more you obey your conscience, the more your conscience will demand of you. And your natural self, which is thus being starved and hampered and worried at every turn, will get angrier and angrier. In the end, you will either give up trying to be good, or else become one of those people who, as they say, live for others, but always in a discontented, grumbling way, always wondering why the others do not notice it more, and always making a martyr of yourself. And once you have become that, you will be a far greater pest to anyone who has to live with you than you would have been if you had remained frankly selfish. The Christian way is different, harder, and easier. Christ says, "Give me all. I don't want so much of your time and so much of your money and so much of your work. I want you. I've not come to torment your natural self, but to kill it. No half measures are any good. I don't want to cut off a branch here and a branch there. I want to have the whole tree down. Hand over the whole natural self, all the desires which you think innocent as well as the ones you think wicked. The whole outfit. I will give you a new self instead. In fact, I will give you myself. My own will shall become yours." Both harder and easier than what we're trying to do. You've noticed, I expect, that Christ himself sometimes describes the Christian way as very hard, sometimes as very easy. He says, "Take up your cross." In other words, it is like going to be beaten to death in a concentration camp. Next minute he says, "My yoke is easy and my burden light." He means both. And one can just see why both are true. Teachers will tell you that the laziest boy in the class is the one who works hardest in the end. They mean this. If you give two boys, say, a proposition in geometry to do, the one who is prepared to take trouble will try to understand it. The lazy boy will learn it by heart because, for the moment, that needs less effort. But 6 months later, when they're preparing for the exam, the lazy boy is doing hours and hours of miserable drudgery over things the other boy understands and positively enjoys in a few moments. Laziness means more work in the long run. Or look at it this way. In a battle or in mountain climbing, there's often one thing which it takes a lot of pluck to do, but it is also, in the long run, the safest thing to do. If you funk it, you will find yourself hours later in far worse danger. The cowardly thing is also the most dangerous thing. It is like that here. The terrible thing, the almost impossible thing, is to hand over your whole self, all your wishes and precautions to Christ. But it is far easier than what we're trying to do instead. For what we are trying to do is to remain what we call ourselves, to keep personal happiness as our great aim in life, and yet at the same time, be good. We're all trying to let our mind and heart go their own way, centered on money or pleasure or ambition, and hoping, in spite of this, to behave honestly and chastely and humbly. And that is exactly what Christ warned us you could not do. As he said, a thistle cannot produce figs. If I am a field that contains nothing but grass seed, I cannot produce wheat. Cutting the grass may keep it short, but I shall still produce grass and no wheat. If I want to produce wheat, the change must go deeper than the surface. I must be plowed up and resown. That is why the real problem of the Christian life comes where people do not usually look for it. It comes the very moment you wake up each morning. All your wishes and hopes for the day rush at you like wild animals. And the first job each morning consists simply in shoving them all back, in listening to that other voice, taking that other point of view, letting that other, larger, stronger, quieter life come flowing in, and so on all day, standing back from all your natural fussings and frettings, coming in out of the wind. We can only do it for moments at first, but from those moments, the new sort of life will be spreading through our whole system, because now we're letting him work at the right part of us. It is the difference between paint, which is merely laid on the surface, and a dye or stain, which soaks right through. He never talked vague, idealistic gas. When he said, be perfect, he meant it. He meant that we must go in for the whole treatment. It is hard, but the sort of compromise we're hankering after is harder. In fact, it is impossible. It may be hard for an egg to turn into a bird. It would be a jolly sight harder for it to learn to fly while remaining an egg. We are like eggs at present, and you cannot go on indefinitely just being an ordinary decent egg. We must be hatched or go bad. May I come back to what I said before? This is the whole of Christianity. There is nothing else. It is so easy to get muddled about that. It's easy to think that the church has a lot of different objects: education, building, missions, holding services. Just as it's easy to think that the state has a lot of different objects: military, political, economic, and whatnot. But in a way, things are much simpler than that. The state exists simply to promote and to protect the ordinary happiness of human beings in this life. A husband and wife chatting over a fire, a couple of friends having a game of darts in a pub, a man reading a book in his own room or digging in his own garden. That is what the state is there for. And unless they are helping to increase and prolong and protect such moments, all the laws, parliaments, armies, courts, police, economics, etc. are simply a waste of time. In the same way, the church exists for nothing else but to draw men into Christ, to make them little Christs. If they're not doing that, all the cathedrals, clergy, missions, sermons, even the Bible itself, are simply a waste of time. God became man for no other purpose. It is even doubtful, whether the whole universe was created for any other purpose. It says in the Bible that the whole universe was made for Christ, and that everything is to be gathered together in him. I do not suppose any of us can understand how this will happen as regards the whole universe. We do not know what, if anything, lives in the parts of it that are millions of miles from this earth. Even on this earth, we do not know how it applies to things other than man. After all, that is what you would expect. We have been shown the plan only insofar as it concerns ourselves. What we have been told is how we can be drawn into Christ, can become part of that wonderful present which the young prince of the universe wants to offer his Father, that present which is himself, and therefore us in him. It is the only thing we were made for. And there are strange, exciting hints in the Bible that when we are drawn in, a great many other things in nature will begin to come right. The bad dream will be over. It will be morning. C.S. Lewis is such a hopeful writer. He loves joy. He loves beauty for its own sake. And he seems to say, and I think he's right, that Christ is all beauty. And as we're drawn into him and we become like him, we become a present offered to the Father. That's where real life is. And whatever we have to sacrifice to experience that will be worth it. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that there are times when you can stop us from being caught up in the wind, in the flow of things just going past us and around us and moving us. And we can see things, even if it's just for a moment, as they really are. Show us those barriers that exist between us and giving our whole self to you. And give us the grace and the courage and the wisdom to let go of things as you teach us to be truly alive. Help us encourage each other in this process. And let this and all churches exist for no other reason than to help draw us into you. We ask these things in your name. Amen. Well, thank you for being with us today. We'll see you in our next devotion.